Welcome everyone to the first round of the Chennai Grand Masters 2024. We have Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, the top French Grandmaster, adjusting his pieces. He's going to take on Parham Maghsoodloo. Maghsoodloo also played in the first edition of the Chennai Grand Masters and seems to like it at India. Here MVL is playing his first ever classical tournament on Indian soil. He's been to Kolkata for the Tata Steel Chess India Rapid and Blitz, and there you have it. Both the players shake hands and Maghsoodloo takes fourth. Now, both of them very exciting players. MVL is very theoretical, while Maghsoodloo likes to play fighting chess always, and never wants to draw his games no matter who his opponent is, be it Magnus, be it Gukesh, be it Ding, be it Fabi. He just wants to play an exciting game of chess, and this is what gives a lot of excitement whenever we follow him. The players adjust their pieces. The time control is 90 minutes plus 30 seconds increment per move, so there is no second time control here, just one time control for these players, and I think they have to be careful with their time management. The players wait for things to kick off. It's a very exciting time for Indian chess because the Chennai Grand Masters is the strongest ever classical super tournament on Indian soil. E4 is what MVL has played on move number 1. And Parham goes for the fighting opening Sicilian. Knight comes out to F3 and Parham chooses E6. MVL is certain that he wants to go for the open Sicilian, pushes his pawn to D4, pawn takes, knight takes on D4. And let's see what Parham chooses now. He goes A6, the Sicilian Khan. This opening has been popularized recently by Magnus Carlsen as he played it against a few players. Bishop E2 is an interesting move. He's keeping his options open of pushing his pawn to C4. Knight F6, now quickly attacking the pawn. Remember, you can't push it because of check and you lose the pawn. So that's the reason why you have to defend it, and MVL plays knight to C3. Now Parham can decide between D6, Queen C7. All these are natural moves. He goes Queen C7. Always in such positions, the queen is beautifully placed on C7, attacking the two, the C file and the diagonal. F4. He pushes his pawn. He's now threatening E5, and so D6 is one possibility. But Parham goes for the more active move, Bishop B4, immediately creating a important moment because the E4 pawn is hanging, and E5 played. Firstly, taking here is possible but not very common. Knight E4 is the most common move, or knight D5, but he takes it. Parham questions MVL's opening choice. Let's see if MVL is well prepared. Pawn takes. In return for these doubled pawns, white has the center, but it's more concrete than that. The queen chops in, and now the A1 rook is hanging. If you play bishop D2, the D4 knight would be hanging. What to do here? Well, MVL says queen D2. If you take my rook, I take here, and then this is a winning position for white because all the pieces are developed. And that's the reason why Parham says, I'm not going to take your rook. I know these things. I'm taking the queen. And so, after bishop takes D2, by the way, MVL has 1 hour 30 minutes while Parham has 1 hour 14 minutes. Black is a pawn up. Knight to E4, attacking the bishop here. The bishop has to move. And maybe the bishop can go to E3. He goes to B4. And I think the main problem for black are his pieces here. They aren't developed, and Parham has to do something. He goes B6. The other possibility was knight C6, of course, but B6, his idea is more active. He wants to play bishop B7 to defend his knight. MVL immediately attacks the knight, pins it to the rook. and Parham has to now defend it with his bishop on b7. That seems like the most logical move. Defends the knight, and rook b1 by MVL, putting bit of pressure on this b6 pawn. And I like this next move, f5. Very nicely done here. So cementing the knight in the center of the board. You want to take en passant, which he does. He takes it. And now after gf6, which is the natural move, white has to find a way to attack this knight. And perhaps the best move here is short castle. And he does it. Short castles is on the board. Black is still a pawn up and maybe coming close to finishing his development. I like this move, f5. Well, you can give a check here, but then king d8 is fine. So he goes rook d1, and now you can see the threat is, for example, if you go, let's say, rook a7, threat is to take and checkmate. Isn't that beautiful? And which is why Maghsoodloo now goes h5 and says you cannot give a check on h5. Very good move by Parham. Bishop goes back. Now the position is roundabout even. b6 is attacked here. Maybe knight c6. Giving up the pawn seems like the best idea. But Parham is wanting to keep that pawn. He goes b5. Now you can attack it with c4 or a4. These are the two possibilities, and MVL goes for c4. He wants to break up the queenside structure. The knight comes out to c6. And he takes the pawn. Well, Parham is going to lose his pawn there on b5, but he first tries to trade off a few pieces. Knight takes, rook takes, and now after ab5, you can see that this is hanging here on a2, which is why MVL pushes the pawn. You can't take it with the pawn. The bishop is hanging. If you take with the rook, I'll take back and still win your bishop. So he goes h4. Well, maybe much better was bishop d5, just putting the bishop on the center of the board, but maybe Parham wants to go h3 at the right moment. So h3 is played here, d5. The main problem is now this pawn is a weakness on h4. d5 cements the knight. It's a cemento knight there. But after rook takes pawn, the bishop is hanging. You can feel it that black's pieces are not coordinating. Bishop c6. He wants to attack here the pawn. And MVL very calmly puts his rook on b6. If you take here, I'm simply going to take this, and go rook b8 check. That's one way to play the position. The other is to simply take on e6. So he goes king d7 here, and now MVL pushes his pawn. This is a very, very strong pawn here, and white is pressing. Parham Maghsoodloo in big trouble. Knight to d6 has been played. And how should white continue now is the question. He can't easily push his pawn. So he goes bishop e2. That's a nice move. The bishop will help to shepherd the pawn further ahead. Maybe then get the bishop to b4. He plays his rook to b8. And now rook takes rook has been played. You can chop off the pawn on h4 now. It's a nice juicy pawn, and the h pawn is a passer. But MVL decides to keep things under control. He's like, if you take here, I take with the bishop, I'm completely winning. I have a passer here, you have another weakness here. So rook a8 played. Now trying to attack this pawn. Rook comes back to b2. defending the a5 pawn. And MVL is very close to getting clearly better. Now knight c4, this rook is attacked. He can take this, but after takes we have an opposite colored bishop, so you want to avoid it. He goes rook a2. Now maybe at some point this pawn is hanging, so he goes rook h8. Instead he should have gone bishop b7, trying to put the bishop here later, but rook h8. And now MVL is clearly better because he can push the pawn forward. This is an important move. He finds it. He's amazing. Maxime Vachier Lagrau in great form here. King comes to c7. It still feels that the pawn is going nowhere. It's blocked by the bishop, the rook, the king is quite close, the knight is well placed, but there are problems. There are clear-cut problems here. a7, and you can feel them. For example, if I go king b7 with the idea of rook a8, I already can take this pawn because now I'm queening. So knight d6 by Parham, and bishop c3 attacking the rook here on the long diagonal, and maybe intending to pin the knight. He goes rook a8, and now bishop e5 is the move. Yes, he puts his bishop right into the heart of the position. King comes to d7, and there are many ways to get an advantage now. g3 is one of them, just creating this outside passer. He goes rook a6. Well, Parham has managed to not create any play for himself here. Now knight c4 has been played. He wants to perhaps chop off this bishop, but MVL can simply put his bishop on b8, and look at how this rook is trapped here. It's absolutely beautiful. The rook is trapped, so that means you are now at least an exchange down, and the easiest way to convert this is to get your h pawn rolling by giving up your g pawn. MVL being very careful here, goes king f2, and d4 by Parham. So now you can take this, play bishop f3 check, followed by g3, which is winning, but direct g3 here by MVL. Takes, king takes g3, and next push is the idea. Knight comes to d5. There's no real threat as such, so you can start pushing the pawn, but MVL just pins the knight to the bishop now. I think Parham can already resign this game. He has nothing much left to play for. Beautiful how MVL actually weaved these mating nets, or you can say the entire attack against the black king, and then created an outside passer. And now he just simplifies. He takes, bishop takes. I'll just need to be careful about this pawn. King f2. This is just high quality chess. If d2 don't fall for king e2, you will lose the rook. So just play first a check and then king e2. He does go d2 and MVL doesn't fall for it. Check to the king. King e7. And now just king e2. Oh, he simply chops off the bishop first. He's calculated it all. Very pretty. Very pretty. The way in which this final position looks is so nice, because the rook, although it's stronger than the bishop, here it can't do a thing. And you have this passer So king f6, you have this passer which is going to distract the black king, and then the white king will come and take the pawn. So king g6, king d3. Well, some bit of care needs to be taken, because I think you are losing this pawn on h3, but MVL has it all calculated. King takes d5. And actually we are going to reach a very zugzwang like position of these mined squares. For example, if you play king e5, king g4 is a draw, because none of the pieces can move, and if you move the king, this is losing. So you have to be very careful here, very mindful of playing this move. King e6 or going this way is also fine, but yeah, you have to be careful. And he resigns here, because the move is king c6 is winning, but also king e6 attacking this pawn, and now it's black who's in zugzwang. And Parham Maghsoodloo resigns the game. MVL playing some great chess here, and actually he played a close to flawless game. Parham's opening choice was a bit risky, but he didn't have any real problems out of the opening per se, so I wouldn't blame the opening. It was his middle game play and also the time pressure that came onto him, which put him under a lot of distress, and in the end he blundered. And so a good start for MVL. Parham needs to get going here in this tournament. The Chennai Grand Masters has not been a tournament that he's done well, but he has 6 more rounds to fire, and he'll be back. It's for sure. He's a big fighter.